I want to bring in MS Now's Inzamam Rashid in Dubai. Peter Baker is chief White House correspondent for the New York Times and an MS Now contributor. Richard Haass is president emeritus of the Council on Foreign Relations and author of the weekly Substack newsletter, Home and Away. With me here in studio, MS Now national security reporter David Rohde. So, Peter, the president calls this a complete victory. Is it?
Well, that remains to be seen, to say the least. I mean, first of all, it's in theory a 2-week pause. It seems hard to imagine he will end up restarting the war. I think he's been looking for a way out, looking for a way to declare victory and say that no more war is needed at this point. But the Iranians have a vote in this too, and we'll see whether they follow through on genuinely opening up the Strait of Hormuz and whether they in fact start to be allowed to start charging tolls as they have demanded, and whether they give up the nuclear material that they haven't given up. So many questions still to be answered. But it looks like the president was looking for a way out. He seized onto this. And the question is whether he can turn it into something that's genuinely enduring or whether it's simply a face-saving way to end the war.
Which brings us, Richard, to the negotiations. One expert called Iran's 10-point proposal a wish list for the regime. Among other things, it would assert Iranian control over the Strait of Hormuz. It would end international sanctions, compensation for damages they'd get, the removal of U.S. forces from the region, and in some versions, a recognition of its right to enrich uranium. So is that, as the president calls it, quote, a workable basis on which to negotiate?
Well, it's only a basis, Chris, if the subjects it raises, the issues it raises, then form the centerpiece of a negotiation. Look, you're going to have to deal with the question of the Strait, and Iran's going to have a larger role going forward, but there's also got to be limits on that role, and others have to have a say in the governance of the Strait. That's an immediate issue. The nuclear program, the question is, can you negotiate a new agreement that places a ceiling on Iran's capabilities with adequate inspections so we're comfortable with it? We're going to have to compromise if we want a negotiated agreement. There's all the other things Iran does that give us heartburn, and also the Israelis heartburn, from support for proxies to maintaining ballistic missiles and the like. So this is an awfully complicated negotiation. The two sides are far apart. I would simply say if we can't reach a formal agreement, I don't think the alternative is going back to war, Chris. It's more of a almost no war, no peace situation in the region. And that will be dangerous, and it will discourage investment. And I would simply say, to answer the question you asked, Peter, let me just be blunt here. Was this a complete victory? Are we better off than we were before this war? I would think the simple answer is no. We are worse off. And depending upon the details of what's negotiated, we'll find out how much worse off. But we shouldn't kid ourselves. Whatever we may have accomplished in the narrow battlefield sense, I believe we have lost in the strategic sense in the region and in the world.
And Inzamam, Iran is also claiming victory. What's the latest we're hearing there?
Yeah, they are. And I think they are doing so because their 10-point plan, their proposal, as clearly now something that is being considered by the U.S. government, by the president. And clearly it was as a result of that meant that this ceasefire is taking place. Look, I think Iran probably knows that militarily on the battlefield they haven't won this conflict, but clearly the chokehold that they've had over the Strait of Hormuz and effectively the world's economy has put President Trump, the U.S. and its allies into a corner, and effectively has now come about to this 2-week ceasefire deal. But look, since this ceasefire has been announced, there's still been a huge number of question marks over whether it is stable enough to last this whole 2 weeks. We are only in day one of this ceasefire, and we're already seeing the fragility of it. Today, we've seen Iran fire missiles into the likes of the UAE, despite the fact that this ceasefire has been in place. There are some suggestions inside Iran that perhaps the messaging hasn't gone out to all the IRGC command centers, but many in the US dismissing that, many here in the Gulf dismissing that as well. And it may just be some military factions that are firing missiles to the likes of the Gulf. But then, on the other hand, we've very much seen the fighting continue in the sense of Lebanon. And this is a very crucial point in this ceasefire agreement. The Pakistanis believe that Lebanon is very much part of this ceasefire framework. Today, the US suggesting that it isn't. And throughout the day today, Israel have carried out some brutal strikes inside Lebanon. The IDF today said that in 10 minutes, the strike targeted 100 plus Hezbollah headquarters, military arrays and command and control centers in Beirut and other parts of southern Lebanon. And in response to that tonight, we're hearing from the Fars news agency, that's an Iranian state news agency, and they have suggested that in fact the traffic in the Strait of Hormuz, which they were due to open as a result of this ceasefire arrangement, will remain shut as long as Israel continues to target Lebanon. So that's coming from Iranian state media this evening, that they may well not open the Strait of Hormuz and continue to halt traffic whilst Israel continues to target Lebanon, which basically tells us everything we need to know, Chris. The fragility of this ceasefire agreement, even on day one, as very much fighting is continuing, and there are huge question marks over whether there is any stability in peace.
We're looking at some live pictures coming out of Beirut of the damage that was caused, but you lay out well the complexity on top of complexities as these negotiations resume. David, let me play more of what Secretary Hegseth said today about one incredibly critical point, at least from the administration perspective. That's Iran's nuclear capability, which, again, according to the administration, is the reason we went to war. Here it is.
This new regime was out of options and out of time, so they cut a deal. They know this agreement means that they will never, ever possess a nuclear weapon. Under the terms, any nuclear material they should have will be removed. Any material, they should not have will be removed. Right now, their dust is deeply buried and watched 24/7 overhead. The president has been clear from the beginning, there will be no Iranian nuclear weapons. Period. Full stop. Other presidents said it. President Trump did it.
From the top of that, which is they were out of options, so they cut a deal, to the bottom of it, where other presidents said it, President Trump did it. What did you hear? What are the important fact checks from what we heard from the administration today?
The most basic one is that Iran has not agreed to give up the enriched uranium. Part of the 10-point proposal, it's saying it's going to retain the right to enrich uranium. So based on my reporting, Hegseth's claim is false. President Trump has not achieved this. And this was one of the main 4 objectives that Hegseth himself outlined at the very first press conference, or one of the first press conferences he had. So that was number 1, permanently deny Iran a nuclear weapon forever. No, that's not clear yet. Maybe they'll negotiate that, but we've been trying to negotiate that for years since President Trump pulled out of the Obama deal. Objective number 2, destroy their missile stockpile. The latest intelligence assessment is that about a third of their missiles have been destroyed. Another third are buried, but they have another third left. That's thousands of them, I was told by 2 U.S. officials, and they also have many hundreds of drones. Goal number 3, destroy Iran's Navy. They did destroy their surface ships, but they failed to prevent Iran from sort of projecting power because they took control of the Strait of Hormuz. That's a huge failure by the United States. That was a lack of planning, this approach of we don't need allies. That failed. We needed NATO ships to be part of our coalition to stop them. And goal number 4, according to Secretary Hegseth at the beginning of the war, prevent Iran's proxies from being able to destabilize the region. That has not been achieved. Their proxies, Hezbollah is being weakened right now by the Israelis, but the Houthis remain very strong. Militias in Iraq remain very strong. Overall, Iran has survived. It's the same regime. It's not a new regime. They now have more control, as Richard said, in terms of the Strait of Hormuz. And the 2 basic beliefs, I think, of like Trump's effort, his strategy of going to war, we can achieve it through air power alone. That did not happen. The regime is still there, and we don't need allies again. We do need allies. We couldn't control the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah, and even if it were to reopen, Peter, and what we just heard from Inzamam is that has not happened. It's not like Americans who care about their gas prices or the other prices that are affected by gas prices going up are going to suddenly think, well, the president said everything is better, so it must be better. So Where does that leave politically this White House as it tries to make claims of victory to the American people?
Well, I think it's hoping that they can snap back relatively quickly in the next few weeks, and that people will move on and forget about the high gas prices, and that things will turn to other topics. The question is whether that's realistic. I don't know. I'm not an economist, but there have been certainly talk that this could have a long-term impact on world economies, especially if the Strait of Hormuz thing is left as murky as it seems to be right now. It's not just even oil. It's things like fertilizer. It's all kinds of things. I saw a report this morning that our local water authority here in the Washington area is lowering the amount of fluoride in the water because of a problem getting supplies from the Middle East. It has a lot of ripple effects. And, investors, of course, are quick to express enthusiasm and price up their stocks. But that doesn't mean that the economies have finished seeing the results of this war, particularly because I think that the result will remain somewhat murky, and that it may not be the end of the real conflict.